Hi, I'm Jack Avery.
And I'm Nate Replinger, and this is our project.
The Gilded Age brought immigrants to the United States with the hope of attaining wealth and a better future. Chicago became an exemplar city of the Gilded Age. It was completely destroyed by the Great Fire and had to be rebuilt. Innovators were attracted to the idea of creating a city from the ground up. The innovative atmosphere nurtured the entrepreneurial spirit. Money, opportunity, location, and transportation drew immigrants and big business to the city.
During the late 1800s and early 1900s, the rise of the big businesses helped turn the U.S. into one of the most economically powerful countries in the world. John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie played major roles in transforming America's economy. Rockefeller purchased as many independent oil refineries as he possibly could, and he soon basically ran the entire oil production in America, making him one of the country's first billionaires. As well, Andrew Carnegie controlled all phases of the production of steel within the country, making him a billionaire. Laissez-faire was one of the most important strategies that corporations used to increase profits and decrease their costs. It was a policy that allowed corporations to operate with very little interference from the government and to just go with the flow. Also, many corporations paid their workers as little as possible. They didn't care if it was unfair or not. This would increase their profits immensely. Many people were upset with big businesses and how they were being run. They argued that they treated their workers very unfairly and paid them very little for how much they were working compared to how much the owners of the businesses were making. Eventually, after protests and government intervention, I believe workers' wages were raised. During the late 1800s and Gilded Age, many immigrants came to the United States for religious freedom and the opportunity to obtain a better life. Many of them came from Southern and Eastern Europe in the 1870s. Once they arrived, many immigrants moved to big cities such as Chicago and New York, where work was easier to find and the cost of living was lower. They impacted society by providing the country with a more diverse population of people in culture and tradition. Immigrants that traveled to the Atlantic Ocean usually had to go through a checking system at Ellis Island in New York, which generally only took a couple of days. But immigrants from the other half of the country that traveled to the Pacific Ocean went to Angel Island in San Francisco, which took up to weeks or months to be processed and checked into the country as a citizen. Many immigrants lived in ethnic neighborhoods within Chicago and New York. The living conditions were very poor and disease often was passed around easily. But Americanization homes were offered to immigrants to help them adapt to an American lifestyle. Public transportation made it easier for citizens living in cities to travel from destination to destination. It allowed them to go wherever they wanted in a timely manner. In 1988, the Chicago Transit Authority completed its program to replace streetcars with buses. By the end of the 20th century, Chicago's public transportation system had grown into one of the largest in the world, run by several public authorities. Urban living during the Gilded Age created many problems such as poor sanitation and an increase in disease. Many people were crammed into small apartments with little to none running water or bathrooms. This, and along with the poor sewage system, led to a major problem for cities such as Chicago and New York. Disease was easily passed from people, and it created horrible living conditions for families and individuals.
During the Gilded Age, big business was controlled by a select few. Wealthy individuals such as Carnegie and Rockefeller just got richer. All that mattered to them was profit. In order to maximize profit, they took advantage of the working class. Businesses hired children, women, and immigrants. They treated the minority workers poorly by paying them low wages, working them long hours, and keeping working conditions unsafe. While industrialization increased, the price of goods decreased. The workers producing the products could no longer afford to buy the products.
The lower class immigrant was exposed to socialistic governments in Europe. In a socialistic government, money is controlled by the greater good and should be spread throughout society. There's a balance of economic wealth. No one is extremely wealthy and no one is extremely poor. During the Gilded Age, immigrants suffered extreme poverty, disgusting working and living conditions, while the wealthy lived extravagantly. This upset many workers who liked the idea of socialism, and they became motivated to form unions.
During this time period, two major labor unions were formed. The Knights of Labor was organized in 1869 by Terence Powderly. In 1881, Powderly encouraged nonviolent boycotts and led negotiations between big business and workers. By 1885, the Knights of Labor built up its membership to 700,000 workers and in 1877 emerged in Chicago. The organization fought for 8-hour workdays, worker-owned factories, the abolishment of child and prison labor, and equal pay for women and men. The organization also wanted to establish safety codes in working places. By 1890s, after several failed strikes, the organization soon dissolved. Another major union which emerged during the Gilded Age was the American Federation of Labor, or AFL. It was founded by Samuel Gompers in 1886 and is still in existence today. The AFL was a craft union. It was a loose organization of skilled workers from roughly 100 local unions devoted to specific trades or crafts. The membership was not open to all. Women and immigrants were not allowed. The AFL assisted workers in need. They focused their fight on improving wages, working hours, and working conditions. They catered to the needs of skilled workers. They represented them in matters of national legislation, and they maintained a national strike fund. They spread the word promoting unionism. They mediated disputes between management and labor and pushed for closed shops. Workers joined unions and turned to strikes because they believed in the power of numbers. They realized if the majority of employees refused to work, the business would suffer and profits would be lost. However, management had ways of working around these strikes. They hired scabs and Pinkertons. Scabs were people employed by businesses to temporarily take over the strikers' jobs. Pinkertons were privately hired security that were brought in to break up strikes. The Haymarket Strike of 1886 took place in Chicago. Thousands of people gathered in Haymarket Square to advocate for 8-hour workdays. A protester threw a bomb into a crowd, and dozens of people were killed. 8 anarchists were then put on trial for murder. 4 were eventually convicted and executed. This violence and radicalism led people to turn away from unions.
The Gilded Age was a time for prosperous growth and innovation. After the Civil War, factories developed new ways to manufacture products, railroads expanded, and the increase in immigration met the increase in demand for workers. To encourage innovation, government took a laissez-faire approach towards big business. It allowed companies to operate with little interference and regulations from government. Capitalism impacted economic growth by encouraging and supporting entrepreneurs who invested in new products hoping to make a profit. Government protected new inventions by establishing patents. Patents gave the inventor exclusive rights for development, use, and sale of their creation. Examples of major inventions and discoveries that stimulated economic growth was the light bulb, expansion of the railroad, the phonograph, the dictaphone, the skyscraper, and oil. Oil was discovered in Pennsylvania by Edwin Drake and soon became a major industry. Cities were rapidly expanding, and after the Great Chicago Fire, the entire city had to be rebuilt. The entrepreneur Charles Yerkes arrived in Chicago with the goal of combining Chicago's various streetcar companies into a single business. Because of government's laissez-faire approach, Yerkes was able to get away with methods of bribery and blackmail to solicit franchise agreements from city government. He took advantage of the opportunity to build a transportation empire. Chicago became a major transportation hub. Montgomery Ward's and Sears Roebuck profited by use of mail-ordered catalogs and had items delivered to its customers by rail. Louis Sullivan also took advantage of the opportunity to build a new Chicago. He was responsible for many architectural innovations and the very first skyscraper. He relied on steel frame construction and the sinking of cement pillars beneath the ground to support the height of skyscrapers.